Okay, so picture this. It's 1969. You're on a busy city street. You're just walking along, and you see a guy, just one guy, standing on a corner, staring straight up at the sky.
What do you do?
Right. You probably glance up, you see, a building, some clouds, and you just keep walking. But what if it's not one guy? What if it's five people, all standing there frozen, looking at the exact same empty spot?
Then you stop. Almost everyone does. You stop, you look up, you're squinting, you're trying to figure out what they see. And before you know it, that group of 5 is a crowd of 20, then 30.
All staring at absolutely nothing, which is what happened. This was a real experiment by Milgram, Bickman, and Berkowitz, and it's sort of the classic image of herd mentality.
It is. And we usually look at that and we think, peer pressure, FOMO, blind conformity. We assume those people are being irrational.
But the research we're getting into today completely flips that on its head. We're looking at the big foundational papers on information cascades, and their argument is, well, it's pretty unsettling.
It's deeply counterintuitive. They argue that joining that crowd, that isn't some emotional reflex. It is a strictly rational, almost mathematical decision.
Which is the core idea, isn't it? We think of rational and herding as total opposites.
But they're not. In a world where you don't have all the facts, following the herd is often the smartest thing you can do. It's a process called social learning. I mean, think about it. If I assume you're not crazy, then your action staring at the sky, that's a piece of data for me.
So if 5 people are looking up, the probability that there's something to see is just higher. So I should ignore my own eyes, which see nothing, and trust the group's data instead.
Exactly. You trade your private signal for the public one. And from an evolutionary perspective, that is a brilliant survival mechanism. You don't have to see the lion yourself.
You just have to see everyone else running.
Right. But, and this is where we start the deep dive, that whole system has this huge structural flaw. It's called an information cascade.
And this is where rational individual choices can lead to a really terrible group outcome. We're talking stock market crashes, political landslides, things like that.
To really get it, we need to break down the mechanics. The researchers use this thought experiment called the simple binary model. It sounds complicated, but it's not.
Okay, so let's set it up. We have a line of people, Anne, Bob, Carol, and they have to make a choice. Just a simple binary choice. Adopt a new technology or reject it.
Right. Adopt or reject. And the key thing is they don't know for sure if the tech is good or bad. All they have is their own little piece of information, their private signal. It says either high for high value or low for low value.
And they can see what the people before them did. So
Yeah.
Anne goes first, Agent 1. She looks at her signal. Let's say it's high.
Okay. Anne has nobody else to look at, so she has to go with her gut. Her signal says high, so she adopts. Simple enough.
Now Bob comes along, Agent 2. He sees Anne just adopted. But to make it interesting, let's say Bob's private signal is low. He thinks this tech is junk.
Okay, this is where the logic kicks in. Bob is rational. He sees Anne adopt, so he thinks, okay, she probably had a high signal. But he's holding a low signal. One high, one low. They cancel each other out.
So he's basically at 50-50. He's indifferent.
He's indifferent. And the tiebreaker rule in the model is just, if you're on the fence, you follow your own signal.
Yeah.
So Bob, he rejects.
All right, so far so good. The system is working. Anne's choice showed her information. Bob's choice showed his. The public knowledge pool is growing.
But let's rewind. Just a tiny change. Anne gets a high signal. She adopts. This time, let's say Bob also gets a high signal.
So he sees Anne adopt. His own signal says high. He definitely adopts. Now we have 2 adopts on the board.
Right. And now, here comes Carol, Agent 3.
This is the moment.
This is the tipping point. Carol looks at the board. She sees 2 people adopted. She infers, okay, Anne probably had a high. Bob probably had a high. So in her mind, she's looking at 2 pieces of evidence saying adopt.
But what if Carol's own private signal, the one in her hand, says low? She thinks this is a huge mistake.
It doesn't matter. And this is the critical part. It just doesn't matter. Do the math. 2 implied high signals from the group versus her 1 private low signal. The weight of the social evidence is just, it's overwhelming.
So the rational thing for her to do is to ignore her own information and adopt.
Yes, that's the cascade. She ignores what she knows and follows the herd. But here's the tragedy of it. When she adopts the next person, Dan, what does he see?
He just sees 3 adopts in a row. He thinks everyone agrees.
But they don't. Carol didn't contribute anything. Her private signal, that crucial piece of low information, the truth as she saw it, It just got thrown away. It never made it into the public pool.
And from that point on, no new information ever gets added.
Never. The learning completely stops. You could have 1,000 people in that line, and if they are all being rational, they will all adopt. But that massive consensus isn't based on 1,000 opinions.
It's based on two, just Ann and Bob.
Yes.
The entire million-person march is just an echo of the first two people who happened to get lucky.
Or unlucky. And that's this idea of idiosyncrasy. The final outcome is incredibly sensitive to just the first couple of signals. If Ann and Bob had randomly gotten low signals, that entire crowd would have stampeded in the opposite direction. The crowd isn't wise, it's just an echo chamber.
Which takes us from, abstract models to some genuinely scary real-world stuff. The sources bring up kidney transplants. I found this part honestly chilling.
Yeah, this comes from a study in 2010. It is a perfect and very high-stakes example. So, you have a donor kidney. It's offered to the first patient on the list.
And that patient's surgeon looks at it. Maybe they see a tiny flaw or just have a bad feeling, a private signal, and they decline it.
Right, so the kidney goes to patient 2. But what does patient 2 see? They see the organ, sure, but they also know patient 1 just turned it down. So they infer, oh, they must have seen something really wrong with it.
So they get skeptical. And if they also decline, now patient 3 sees 2 rejections.
And you're in a cascade. You can have a perfectly good, life-saving organ get rejected by everyone on the list just because the first person was a little picky. It creates a stigma.
The kidney itself hasn't changed, but the social signal attached to it has become toxic.
Yeah.
People are literally dying because of a false cascade.
It's the same mechanism behind the employment stigma. You see a resume with a big gap.
And you don't think, oh, maybe they were taking care of a family member. You think, how many other employers have already rejected this person?
Exactly. You're not judging the candidate. You're judging the decisions of the people who came before you. You're letting the cascade do the work.
It's efficient, I guess, but it's incredibly fragile.
Mm-hmm.
The research really stresses that word, fragility. You'd think 1 million people agreeing on something would be rock solid.
But it's a house of cards, because remember Carol? She joined the cascade, but she didn't really believe it. She was overriding her own gut. If everyone in line is doing that, the consensus is paper thin. It takes almost nothing to shatter it.
Like a new piece of public information.
Or even just one credible person standing up and saying, hey, wait a minute. That can reverse the whole flow because people are secretly looking for an excuse to trust their own information again.
This has to explain why political momentum feels so strange. The sources talk about the 2004 primary with Kerry and Dean.
Oh yeah, the Kerry momentum, classic case. Kerry had some big wins early on. Voters in later states didn't all suddenly decide his policies were better. They just looked at the scoreboard. They inferred electability. Well, Iowa liked him, New Hampshire liked him. They must know something I don't.
But if you just change the order of the primaries, if a state that liked Dean had voted first, the whole thing could have gone the other way.
Totally. That's path dependence. The winner isn't always the best candidate. Sometimes they're just the one who got to speak first.
Okay, so that brings up the influencer problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So far we've assumed everyone's signal's equally good. But what about experts? People who actually know more?
The tennis racket analogy.
Right. If I'm buying a racket and I see Roger Federer uses a Wilson, I mean, that's it. Decision made. I'm buying a Wilson. His signal is just better than mine.
And for you, individually, that makes perfect sense. But for the group as a whole, it can be a total disaster.
Wait, how? Why? Shouldn't we want everyone to follow the smartest person in the room?
It's a paradox. Think about it. If the expert acts first, what happens?
Everyone just copies them. Instantly.
The cascade starts on the very first person. And what does that mean? It means nobody else bothers to use their own private information. The group learns absolutely nothing from its members. All you get is a carbon copy of one person's opinion. And experts can be wrong.
So, and this feels so backwards, you actually want the expert to act last.
Ideally, yes. You want all the regular people to go first, using their own, messy, imperfect signals. That process builds up a rich, diverse pool of public information. Then the expert steps in, looks at all that data, combines it with their own insight, and makes a much better informed decision.
That is the complete opposite of how we run meetings. We always let the boss talk first.
And it's the worst way to do it if you want an honest answer. If the leader goes first, everyone just aligns. If the leader waits, they might actually hear the truth.
There's also a timing element here you mentioned with investment booms. This idea of an explosive cascade.
The waiting game, yeah. Imagine a new, risky market opens up. Everyone's interested, but nobody wants to be the first one to jump in. So you get this This silence, it looks like no one cares.
That they're all just watching each other.
Exactly. Then one person, maybe they're just a little more confident, they make a move. And that single action reveals a positive signal to everyone else. And suddenly the dam breaks. You go from total silence to a frenzy overnight.
It explains why bubbles just seem to appear out of nowhere. The information was always there, it is just stuck.
So we have to add a layer of human psychology to this. So far, we've been talking about these perfect, rational agents. But we're messy. The sources talk about bounded rationality and how our own biases can make these cascades even worse.
The two that really stood out were correlation neglect and overconfidence. Correlation neglect. That sounds like we're double counting.
That's a perfect way to put it. When you see a line of 100 people, your brain doesn't think, oh, person 99 is just copying person 98. Your brain thinks, wow, 100 separate people all decided this was a good idea.
When in reality, it was maybe 5 people making a real choice and 95 people just following them.
Precisely. But we neglect that correlation. We see the volume, not the herding. And that makes us overestimate how strong the signal really is, so we jump into the cascade even faster.
So our own cognitive bias reinforces the trap. But then there's overconfidence. I mean, we usually think of arrogance as a bad thing, but in this story, the overconfident person is kind of the hero.
The arrogant savior, yeah, I mean, think about it. To break a bad cascade, you need someone who's willing to look at 1,000 people marching one way and say, you're all wrong, I'm right.
Someone who trusts their own gut more than the evidence seems to warrant.
You need that irrational self-belief. The entrepreneur who ignores the terrible market research, the investor who bets against the entire trend, they're the ones who can break the consensus and inject new, vital information back into the system.
It's a funny thought. A group of rational people might need an irrational person to save them from themselves.
And that idea of group structure is crucial. We don't all see everyone else, right? We exist in networks.
Yeah, the sources talk about the difference between an egalitarian network and a royal family network.
An egalitarian network is where everyone just sees a few of their neighbors. Information moves really slowly, person to person. It seems inefficient. But because it's slow, people have to rely on their own information for longer. It's harder for a bad cascade to take over the whole system.
Compared to the royal family model, which sounds an awful lot like social media.
It's exactly that. One central group of influencers, pundits, celebrities, and everyone is watching them. So if that small royal family gets something wrong, the entire global network gets it wrong instantly. There's no buffer.
So our hyperconnectivity might actually be making us more vulnerable to these mass errors.
It's a real possibility. We've optimized for speed, but we may have killed the kind of informational diversity that protects us. Diversity requires a little bit of isolation.
Is there any natural break on this process? Or are we just stuck hurting forever?
There is one big one: congestion. Let's go back to the restaurant line.
If the line is too long, I don't care how good the food is supposed to be, I'm going somewhere else.
And that's a negative payoff externality. The cost of joining the herd gets too high. And that forces you to break away and try the empty restaurant next door.
Which generates new public information.
Yes, congestion forces exploration. It's a natural check that helps the group find the truth.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've gone through the mechanics, the psychology, the networks. But I want to end on what I thought was the most provocative idea in all this research. It's something called the principle of countervailing adjustment.
Ah, yeah. This is the one that really messes with your head. As a society, we're obsessed with transparency. We think the cure for bad decisions is always more public information.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
That's what we say. But this principle suggests it might be the opposite. It suggests that if you give people too much public information, if you make the herd signal too loud and clear, you actually make people lazy.
Because the weight of that public signal just becomes too much to argue with.
It's overwhelming. If I can see exactly what everyone else is doing and thinking, I have almost no incentive to do my own hard work, to trust my own unique insight, I just discard my private signal right away.
So by pushing for total transparency, you might actually be reducing the total amount of real information in the system. You shut down all the private investigation.
You can end up with a dumber crowd. The research implies that a little bit of opacity, a little bit of fog might actually be healthy. It forces us to think for ourselves, at least for a little while longer, and that can lead to a smarter group in the end.
That's a really tough idea to accept, that more data isn't always better. That maybe we should be protecting our own quiet, private signals a little more fiercely.
It makes you ask a fundamental question. When you look at the world, are you trying to learn what's true? Or are you just trying to learn what other people think is true?
And on that note, we will leave you to think about your own place in the herd.